Morning, year six. I hope you're well and have had a good day so far. Today, in our reading lesson, we're going to be thinking about making predictions relating to chapter 8 of Private Peaceful. To be successful today, we need to understand what a question is asking us, where it relates to, think about how the text is suggesting that the events are going to unfold. So we can't just pick answers out of anywhere. We've got to think about what we know and what's going to happen next. We need to support our answer with reference to or a direct quotation from the text as well. Right, guys, recall. Did Mr. Munnins like Charlie? Did the Colonel like Charlie? Did Molly's parents like Charlie? And did Tommy like Charlie? What do you think? Did Mr. Munnins, the teacher, like Charlie? No, he didn't. He gave him that punishment, didn't he? If you remember the time that Charlie stood up for Tommy when Tommy was standing up for Joe, Charlie was the one who got punished, but Charlie didn't want to let down the face, did he? Did the Colonel like Charlie? No, he sacked him eventually, didn't he? He gave him the kick from his job due to the fact of the disagreement over Bertha and what should happen to her. They forbade. Molly's parents hated Charlie. They forbid them to meet one another. Did Tommy like Charlie? Yeah, he loved him. He loved him. But the ed suffix there is key, isn't it? He loved him. He does love him. He liked him. But Molly. But because of Molly, because of the complexities of their relationship, both of them with Molly, it's become more complicated now. He does love him. Does he like him? We're not sure if he likes him anymore. He has problems with his relationship with his brother now. Today, what we're going to be thinking about as we go through these next passages is particular words on each page that you can put into these sections. So we'll look at the first one. This is going to fill in the gap from page 108. So it was different to spot the soldiers. It should say it was difficult. So it was difficult to spot the soldiers as they're wearing something clothes. Okay, so there's something about the type of clothing. There's an adjective to describe those clothes, which demonstrates why it will have been difficult to spot them. Sorry about my typo there. So if you remember now, we're carrying on from page 107. At training camp on Salisbury Plain, living cheek by jowl, we all got to know each other really fast, though not necessarily to like each other. That came later. And we got to know our parts too, how to make believe we were soldiers. So this is the idea that Tommy doesn't quite believe it to be a real life yet of being a soldier. At the moment, he's talking about getting to know our parts, like they're pretending to be soldiers. And we got to know our parts too, how to make believe we were soldiers. We learned how to wear khaki costumes, our khaki costumes. So not talking about our uniforms, but costumes, like they're dressing up. I never did get to wear the scarlet uniform I'd been hoping for. That's the grand one. If you remember that visiting soldier who tempted him to being a soldier was wearing when the band was going. The scarlet uniform I'd been hoping for, how to iron creases in, iron wrinkles out, how to patch and mend our socks, how to polish our buttons and badges and boots. We learned how to march up and down in time, how to turn about turn without bumping into one another, how to flick our heads right and salute when we saw an officer, how to flick our heads right and salute when we saw an officer. Whatever we did together in time. All except little Les James, who could never swing his arms in time with the rest of us, no matter how many sergeants and corporals bellowed at him. His legs and arms stepped and swung in time with each other and with no one else. And that was all there was to it. He didn't seem to mind how often they shouted at him, and he had two left feet. It doesn't mean he actually had two left feet. It's an expression that means he couldn't quite walk as clearly and as calculatedly as other people were able to. It gave us all something to laugh about, and we did a lot of laughing in those early days. As a sentence that I find quite powerful, knowing that this is about people in the military, we did a lot of laughing in those early days. Now, if they're mentioning they did it in those early days, that probably means they didn't do it as the story carries on. If I look then at this passage, where can I see some clothes being described? Where can I see some clothes being described? Okay, so in the first section, I've got to spot if I can spot any clothes being described. Now, it's costumes is a synonym for clothes, but so is uniform. Now, would scarlet uniform make it hard to spot people? No, it wouldn't. It'd be that khaki clothing. Okay. Okay. Guys, in the second section, if you don't move something during marching class, you will look silly. So what was it about Les James that was making him look silly? My face is in the way. There we go. Okay. A lot of laughing in those early days. They gave us rifles and packs and trenching shovels. We learned to run up hills with heavy packs and how to shoot straight. Charlie didn't have to be taught. On the rifle range, he proved to be far and away the best shot in the company. When they gave him his red marksman's badge, I was so proud of him. He was pretty pleased himself, too. Even with the bayonets, it was still a game of make believe. We'd have to charge forward screaming whatever obscenities we knew, and I didn't know many, not then, at the straw filled dummies. Obscenities is a synonym for rude word. And it's interesting that Tommy's saying he didn't know many then. So that almost again implies it shows that he's young, isn't he? Because he was 15 when he joined, so he wouldn't know as many rude words as meant some of the older soldiers. But also then the fact that he didn't know any then shows that's changed. Like he used to laugh, it's changed now. He knows all of his rude words because he's been around these soldiers for this time. We'd plunge our bayonets in to the hilt, swearing and cursing the filthy Hun as we stabbed them, twisting the blade and pulling it out as we'd been taught. Go for the stomach, peaceful! Nothing to get hung up in there. Stab, jab, twist, out. So really, really clear instructions by the corporals for what they should be doing. And still this negative association of the enemy, which you would expect because they were being taught to dislike them, but calling them the Hun is this offensive word for people of German extraction. Okay, and we can see on the page there, what would a gardener need a new one of? And sometimes people like to what in the bottom of a pool? Everything in the army had to be done in lines or rows. We slept in a long line of tents, sat on privies in rows. Not even the privy was private. I learned that very quickly. In fact, nowhere was private anymore. So they've lost their privacy, they've lost their individuality. We lived every moment of every day together, and usually in lines. We lined up together for shaves, for food, for inspections. Even when we dug trenches, they had to be in lines, straight trenches with straight edges, and we had to dig fast too. One company in competition with another. We poured sweat, our backs ached, our hands were permanently raw with blisters. Faster! The corporal shouted. Deeper! You want to get your head blown off, peaceful? No, corporal. You want to get your heart blown off, peaceful? No, corporal. You want to get your blown off, peaceful? So there's some quite, these are these obscenities. So these rude words the corporals are using to say, you don't want this part of your body, you don't want that part of your body blown off, do you, peaceful? Then dig, you lazy. Dig. So these are quite rude words. These words that are used to describe the soldiers here. Because when you get out there, that's all you've got to hide in. God's good earth. And when those whiz bangs come over, I'm telling you, you'll always wish you dug deeper. The deeper you dig, the longer you live. I know. I've been there. So the corporal's using his own experience, as well as his ferocity of his manner, is using his own experience of having been in the trenches himself to say, you want to dig as deep a hole as you can, because the deeper it is, the better chance of avoiding these whiz bangs. If we look on this page, a section here around sleeping in talks about privies. Now, privies is a synonym for toilet. Toilet. I'll give you that clue that might help you when you're completing your vocabulary work. So you've got your vocabulary work there, which links to the 3 pages we've looked at today. So 108, 109, 110. And then we're thinking back to page 106, looking at an example of a bit of prediction. So we think about when we were introduced to Sergeant Hanley. Do you think at that point he'd become friends with Tomo? What do you think? Would they become friends? It's a bit of a silly question, I've got to admit, but hopefully you can elicit from your knowledge of the text and of the character of Sergeant Hanley that really it would be unlikely they'd become friends because of how Sergeant Hanley treats them. So remember, stand still, look in front, you horrible little man, stomach in, chest out, peaceful. So really shouty, really unpleasant terminology that he uses to describe Charlie and Tommy. Also, it's specific, isn't it? It's not just generally unpleasant. He calls them names such as vermin and worm to show that he's not fond of them. So really remembering that quality of answer, we've got that detail from the text. The red part of our answer says he wasn't very nice to them. The orange section is now more specific, talking about the vermin and worm, the words that we use to describe them that are not pleasant language points to describe somebody. Finally, then, we add to our answer by saying the fact that there was a specific dislike between Sergeant Hanley and Charlie, and that Charlie challenged him, Charlie stood up to him, would probably result in Tomo having this negative perception, this negative view of Sergeant Hanley. So your prediction, the evidence is there that Sergeant Hanley was rude and that Charlie didn't like Sergeant Hanley. But the fact that Sergeant Hanley, wasn't liked by Charlie is something now we've got to think about how that might influence Tommy. Now, Tommy, although he's got this difficult relationship with his brother because of his relationship with Molly, Tommy still respects his brother and they look out for each other. And therefore, if Sergeant Hanley's rude to Tommy, what's that going to mean for Tommy and how he perceives Sergeant Hanley? Okay. Guys, with your predictions today, you're going to be looking at page 108. How might Les James' ability to walk in time affect how he's treated by the sergeant, by the corporals, and the other senior soldiers? How do you think the other soldiers will react when they see how good Charlie is at shooting? And then finally, do you think the corporals will inspire the soldiers to dig deep, or do you think their trenches will be shallow? So will they want deep trenches, these soldiers, when they're digging them, or will they want shallow ones that aren't as deep? What do you think? What's your prediction and why? Right, guys, answers there for that page, please. Those prediction questions, and I look forward to seeing them. Thank you for listening sensibly today. Another week to go, and then we're back. We'll be reading Private Peaceful in class, and I can't wait to hear Tyreek Sergeant Hanley. Peaceful! See you soon. Bye-bye.